This is the year you move. This is the year you take that next step. Whether you're starting out, starting over, or starting something new, you need a local moving company that you can trust. We're Mankato Movers. We're your hometown moving resource, and we'll get you there. Call or email about our pre-move service today.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of I.C.E. I.C.E. stands for Inspire, Collaborate, and Encourage, and is our weekly collaborative podcast that we produce every Thursday at 4 p.m. It's typically produced live, obviously this week with Christmas Eve coming up here on Thursday. We decided to bump this one up to Tuesday with our guest, and a fitting guest that will be as well. I'll get to the introduction of him here in a second. So 2 p.m. today, obviously, otherwise normally 4 p.m. on Thursdays. And each week we interview a guest or guests that we felt had an interesting story to tell about our three key words: inspire, collaborate, and encourage. In 2020, we found great comfort in watching podcasts of others, not only in our industry, but just in general and in life in general. And we are excited to bring this to you each week. We also have the ability in many of these presentations, such as today, for you, the viewers, to ask questions of our guests. So you may have to go to StreamYard to give the approval there for your name to pop up, but otherwise we will get underway here. We've got a great guest today. We were just talking off screen before we started that I'm one of the few that still call this man Billy, but we have joining us today all the way from Celebration, Florida, Pastor Mr. Bill Vanderbush. Hey, Bill.
Hey Jay, man, it's so good to see you, and it's so good to reconnect after all these years, man. It's like we pick up right where we left off.
Well, yeah, except the bad thing is right where I left off is the bad memory of me punching you, which is not a good one. Even my dad reminded me of that.
That's in like one of the very few fights I ever got into in my life was in grade school, and it was you.
But
And
it
man,
wasn't even me fighting you. It was me just throwing a roundhouse punch with my eyes closed, and I ended up hitting you. I mean,
I think I had a basketball or something I held up or so. Anyway, yeah, it caught me right in the eye. That was a good shot too. That was a really good. I think we ended up in the principal's office. I laugh about it later.
I think I was in there a little bit longer than you were, though. I think, I don't think you got quite as much trouble as I got in on that one. And I think I've apologized to you about 10 times since we
You did
here.
actually, I think, spend a fair amount of time in the principal's office by.
Is your recollection? Sure. Throw me under the bus. I appreciate that. Oh, wow.
Hey, we were in grade school. We got hauled in for just about everything back then.
Oh, yeah. Everything was subject to paying a visit to the principal or even the superintendent back then. What grade was it when you left Lake Bend? I can't remember. Was it 6th grade or 7th grade?
I think it was my freshman year of high school.
Freshman, okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember how.
We moved over to Brookings, which might as well have been a whole other world away, another state, 20 miles, but another state. And so it just felt like a completely other world,
Mm-hmm.
So I did. Then I'm going to high school in Brookings. So, but still keep in contact with folks in Lake Bend. You used to, and I never got a chance to do this. I never took the opportunity to do this, I guess. But did you ever I'm thinking about that roundhouse punch because that was a good shot. But you used to do some boxing, like you were taking boxing lessons back then, right?
No. That was what was it? Adrian Little.
Yes, Mr. Little's
back
house.
Mr. Little's house. Yeah, he had a little boxing thing in his basement there, and there was some of us who would go up there and pretend to box. I usually, I got my lights punched out by a couple different people up there and knocked out cold. So there wasn't really any boxing involved. And that one that I threw to you, I can remember to this day. I closed my eyes and literally just put my hand out and I spun and I just caught you. And I don't think you and I were even fighting. I think I was fighting with somebody else and I ended up catching you. And that's why 40 some years later, I still feel bad about it. So, well, maybe not 40 years later. We're not that old.
It was a good shot. It was a shot that was solid enough to blacken up my eye for a day.
Yeah.
So I think I got some sympathy from a couple of the girls in the class. So it was a win all the way around. I mean, really, it's not like we had a huge class either. I think I had like
Right.
18 or 16 or something. I
Yeah,
mean,
because my adopted brother, who I don't believe you ever met, Joel, because would have joined your class the freshman year, because
okay,
we were seventh, eighth, ninth. So he would have joined your class freshman year, and yeah, they were one of the smaller classes in a number of years. Your class was one of the smaller ones. I don't
yeah,
remember what the final graduating count was, but I know it wasn't very big.
yeah. I'm sure they were dropping like flies. That graduation ceremony had to be like 10 minutes long.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think you guys had like 27 people in your class, which we were always kind of envious of because you guys had the bigger class. And
Yep.
I was actually recalling with my kids a while back. They were talking about weird memories, and I remember. I don't know why I bring this up, but this might be kind of amusing. But we had a spelling bee in Ivanhoe one time,
Okay.
and by and large, Robert Otto was the odds-on favorite. He was the best speller in the class. And of course, we all like were competing to go to Ivanhoe because you got out of school. You could ride the bus to Ivanhoe. It's kind of a nice thing to do. And so I recall somehow getting a word that I could spell, and right behind me, Robert. He and I were the only two left, and I did not belong anywhere near a spelling bee. I mean, it was just a total fluke that I even like won this thing. But Robert got knocked out by an impossible word I could have never spelled, and now I find myself on my way to Ivanhoe, and it was me and Krista, and so I was super happy about that because hanging out with Krista and going to Ivanhoe, made me feel like a big guy. So I get there, and suddenly, to my horror, I realize there's a ton of people in this auditorium. I'm up in front of these people, and now I'm expected to spell words. And my first word, I hate this word to this day, was the word miscellaneous. I'm not even going to try to spell it. I hate the word. And I got knocked out in the first round. And I just remember Krista looking at me and just shaking her head because she knew I didn't belong there. I knew I didn't belong there. I had totally stolen it from Robert. And I do feel bad about. That's my right hook from grade school.
What grade? I was gonna say, what grade was that in?
I was like 6th or 7th.
Okay. I don't
That
remember.
was bad.
I remember doing like spelling bees like within class, but never anything where we were doing it against other schools. So maybe that, I don't
It
know.
was like some national competition that came to the Midwest. It was a once in a lifetime shot. I mean,
Oh,
I probably stole Robert's academic dream. You know, he probably would have gone out and changed the world, except it took the spelling bee from him. I mean, who knows?
well, and sadly, you're aware that I'm sure probably that Robert passed away a few years ago, number of
I
years
didn't
ago.
know that.
Yeah.
Now I feel super bad.
I don't remember exactly if it was a car accident or what it was. His sister Carrie was in my class,
Yeah.
and but I don't remember exactly what the situation was. But I believe he might have been the first one in your guys' class to pass away that I can remember, anyways, as far as
Wow.
class members of yours that have passed away.
That's
So
wild. Yeah, I had not heard that.
yeah,
Yeah, he and I
yeah.
lost touch after I moved out of town. So
Well, let's talk about this. So you sent me
yeah.
your interview questions earlier today, and you kind of graduated high school. You kind of had the film industry in your dreams, right? Were you hoping to be an actor, or I know you've
No,
done
not.
some animation and stuff like that, but
Yeah, I actually ended up working for Warner Brothers, Warner Brothers Animation, actually as a more of a dealer of animation art. That's where the money was, and so I actually ended up doing that for a little while in my 20s. But I never did go out to LA. I went out down to Austin, Texas, met a girl down there, Tracy, who I knew actually met her when I was 5 years old when we lived in Austin.
wow.
Right before we moved up to Minnesota. We lived in
Okay.
Austin for a couple of years. She was my next door neighbor from 5 to 7. And so then we moved over to Marshall, Minnesota when I was like 8, and then somehow made it over to Lake Benton. And yeah, she and I kept in touch for years. Matter of fact, I remember uh, remember Jay Furman and Darren Hirschberger
Hmm.
were next door neighbors
Yep.
of mine back then. So we used to hang out quite a bit. And I'd say like to Darren, I got a picture of Tracy, and she was just cute as could be back then. She's like a year older than I am. Still, she's like just still a complete smoke show. I don't know how that works, but she looks like 10 years younger than I do. It's ridiculous. So but I remember holding up this picture and saying to Darren Hirschberg, I'm going to marry this girl someday. And Darren would laugh and he'd be like, "You have no chance in your dreams." All this, and it kind of egged me on a little bit. So when I was about 16, 17 years old, we went back down through Austin, and sure enough, I mean, I just decided I'm just going to like call Tracy up and see what she's doing. And when she answered the door, my goodness, she looked totally different than she did when she was like 12. So, yeah, so I don't know. We just kind of struck up a relationship all over again. Got married at 18, which I always
Wow.
tell people. People say, "Well, you've been married 30 years or 29 years this year." Say, how old were you when you got married? And I was like, "Well, we were so young when the minister said you may kiss the bride." I was like, "Gross."
uh, yeah, that's well, I got married at 19. My first marriage, I was 19, and yeah, I'm probably right there with you on the gross part as far as
Man,
what was really going through your head at that age. It was too
it was
too young,
yeah
but kudos to you guys to make it work for 29 years. I mean,
against
that's
the odds,
awesome.
man. So we ended up living in Austin. I never made it out to Los Angeles. Never made it out to the West Coast. My son lives out there now, but we stayed there in Austin, and lo and behold, I mean, I ended up going to college in Dallas, Texas. My dad had told me, he said, if you just go and get a couple of years of this mission school, like this Bible college, because my dad was a minister, as everybody in
Hmm.
Lake Benton knew. If you go get a couple of years of Bible college under your belt, then I'll just pay for whatever else you want to do. And I didn't want to be a preacher. I just thought that's my dad's thing. It's not my thing. We have the same beliefs, but that's not what I'm gonna do. And so I ended up going to Bible college, and then I got an opportunity to go back down to Austin, and help a guy uh, plant and pastor a church. And I thought, well, that might be kind of fun for 6 months to a year or whatever. And I
Hmm.
ended up staying there for 12 years. He ended up leaving a couple of years later, and I ended up pastoring the church. At 25, I was a senior pastor of a church. I have no idea what they were thinking. But during that time, we ended up seeing the church experience tremendous growth. We started building, a building, went through this whole process. And somewhat accidentally, it all just kind of became a career. Uh, I just found a passion for it. And I understood, there was a point in time where I understood why my dad had given his life to this thing. And so I finally said yes to it and gave up and gave into it. So that's kind of what I've been doing for the last, I don't know, 20, 27, 28 years.
Well, and for you, from an inspirational and an encouragement standpoint, it wasn't just your dad. I mean, your mom, I know, was also. I mean, your mom was your dad's sidekick. I mean, they were
Totally.
they were a pair, and it's very interesting now since you and I have reconnected to watch and follow along on Facebook and stuff like that. It's so incredible that you and Tracy are almost. I'm sure there are things that are completely different than what your mom and dad were, but to me, it's like Bill and Tracy are doing almost the same thing that Henry and Rhonda did. I mean, it's so impressive to see that path kind of in the same trajectory of what your parents were. Granted, you're not
Yep.
living out of a Winnebago or whatever the green machine. That's why I think
Yeah.
well, you weren't living out of it, but I think you guys put quite a few miles on that, didn't you?
We did. We put a lot of miles on it. Hey, it's interesting because now that you say it, it's so obvious. But I don't know if I've ever really thought about it or articulated it. It is true. We've kind of, in a lot of ways, we've kind of mirrored that sort of traveling ministry lifestyle that my parents had. And my mom, she's doing amazing. She's 81 years old. She went to Africa a while back here before the COVID thing hit. She was over in Mozambique and doing mission work over there. She's just she is a powerhouse and a half, and just now, for the first time in her life, experiencing a few health challenges that are just brand new to her. She's never been in the hospital before she was 81, but
Mm-hmm.
this year she's had a couple of trips, and so it's kind of interesting to see folks get older and slow down.
Well, and if I remember correctly, your dad was wasn't he in the nursing home there in Brookings,
He
kind of towards the
was.
tail end? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. He passed away there in Brookings in the nursing home. Yeah, he was actually in Tyler for a little while.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah, and when they were living in Ruthven, he initially started out in Tyler. Then we brought him down to Austin. Then he was over there in Brookings. But they were like 10 years apart, and so Mom took care of him, in the last years of his life. And it was, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it was a really, I think probably one of the biggest inspirations to me was watching her, take care of him in the face of like suffering, difficulty, and not lose heart or lose faith, to stay encouraged. That whole thing, I'll never
Right.
forget that. That's
Well, and that's just the love. I mean, the
Yeah,
love that they had for each other, and through sickness and health part. I mean, that's exactly what it is. And yeah, I remember. I can remember as a kid coming over just wanting to play cops and robbers or baseball or whatever, and your dad always pulling the Bible out, and we said a prayer before we went outside, which at the time I was like, well, I just want to go play, but I didn't really think of it. Now you look back at it and go, maybe you should have paid a little more attention, I guess. I don't know.
he did. It was always such an interesting thing because I couldn't have any friends, I mean, you or anybody else, come over to the house without Dad just being like, "Oh, we need to say a prayer." I
Yeah.
mean, it was, and I just remember. I hope he watches this. I'll send him a link. But Tanner Smith, he was
Hmm.
around town for just a short period of time. Tanner loved coming over to the house for dinner, and and I found out. I mean, it's like he'd sit there, man. It's like it was time to pray, and he was ready to go, man. It's like mealtime. Boom, Tanner's there, and Dad would say these, marathon prayers at dinner time, and you could see like Tanner going, the fried chicken is like right. But Dad always took that opportunity to just, share faith, to spread some hope. He always was encouraged and
Yeah.
encouraging. Never knew my dad any other way than encouraging. He was just always that way.
Did he ever get mad? Did you ever see him get mad about anything?
Not really, no.
Yeah.
Um, I remember, here's the closest thing I ever heard of my dad cussing. He and I were watching the NBA playoffs one time. We were in a hotel somewhere. I think it was in New Ulm, Minnesota. This really stuck out to me. And Dad it was coming down the wire, and Mom was trying to sleep, and she leans over and says, "Henry, can you please turn the TV down?" And my dad was really into it, and he said, kind of somewhat forcefully, "Doggone it, honey, I'm trying to watch the game." And Mom rolled over and went to sleep. And I laid there in the other bed thinking,
Just
they're
in
getting a
fear.
divorce. This is like, it's going down now. And I mean, I thought my world was coming to an end. My dad said, "Doggone it," to my mom. It's like, that was the most I ever heard them ever raise their voices at each other. It's the maddest I ever saw him ever get,
Yeah.
really, about anything. So
Wow.
he was consistently, well, he had grown up in a home that was incredibly abusive, and with a father who was, yeah, 8 brothers and sisters, and he had a dad who just beat the snot out of all of them. And I think he pretty much determined that no matter what in his life, he was going to do something exactly the opposite. When he decided to go to Bible college and become a preacher, his dad was livid. And he said, the world has too many preachers. We need more farmers. And Dad always said, maybe in the long run he was right. Who knows? But he went to Bible college for 4 years, and he comes back after graduating and walks into the house. And my grandfather never even looked up. He just said, "There's chores to be done. Put your boots on, get out to the barn." Never even looked up. Never said welcome home. Never said how about the last 4 years. None of that. It was just like, been loafing in college. Now get out and do some work. And so that was the kind of home he was a part of. And I felt like Dad sort of did this thing where he compensated on exactly the opposite spectrum of what he had experienced growing up. And being an only child, he didn't get married until he was like 41 years old. So I came along to
Really?
him, yeah,
I
yeah,
would have. I would not have guessed that. I thought they had
yeah.
been married. A lot younger than that. Okay.
No, no. I came along to him a lot later in life, and so being his only kid, and his son, he just, I mean, I had a ringside seat for everything. Whether missionaries were putting their kids in boarding school, I was drug all over the world, and there were no other kids there because the missionaries back in those days would put their kids in some boarding school somewhere. They'd see them like twice a year. But my dad refused to do that. He was like, "No, my son's going to come with me." And they're like, "Well, this is a dangerous place. I mean, this is like this hostage situations. It's dangerous for kids or whatever." And Dad was like, "No, he'll be fine." So he figured if he could survive the farm, I could survive, third world countries. And so he
Yeah.
dragged Mom and I all over the planet. And so consequently, I grew up thinking. I mean, I was like the only kid in the middle of a bunch of adults. So I had tons of attention, was spoiled rotten in terms of just love, not stuff, but love.
Right.
And so and I thought that was normal for everybody. And actually, it wasn't until we moved to Lake Benton and I got to, live in an actual house and go to an actual school and sit in a desk, and, carve my initials into it, like, which I found, by the way. I found the desk before they tore the school down. I went back to the school, and that desk was still in Ms. Haugen's classroom, Ms. Wheeler's classroom. Or wait, no, who was the sixth grade teacher?
Yeah, Mrs. Wheeler. You're
Mrs.
right.
Wheeler,
Yep.
and I found all of the little marks and personal graffiti that I did in my desk, still there after all those years. I wish I'd have bought it.
Yeah, there you go. You should have bought it and brought it home and
Should
made
have.
some sort of shrine out of it or something.
Put little red ropes around it, for
Yep.
kids.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
Caution, do not touch the desk or something. No, those, I mean, we've mentioned her now a couple of times, and that Mrs. Haugen, I don't know if you had a favorite teacher when you were in grade school or
She
in
was
the,
everybody's favorite.
oh man, she was just hands down. I mean, and not in no disrespect to the other ones, but she
No,
just
no.
made learning so incredible and so fun. And Tanya has heard me tell the story a number of times, and I know it was your class because we were in Mrs. Wheeler's classroom. You guys were in Mrs. Haugen's classroom watching the space shuttle Challenger lift
Challenger,
off.
right? Yeah,
And I had asked to go to the bathroom, not knowing that that's what you guys were doing, and asked to go to the bathroom and happened to walk by
yeah,
the room, if you remember how it was laid out, and
yep.
and then it blew up, and I got in trouble. Imagine that. I got in trouble, but I ran back to the room. I'm like, Mrs. Wheeler, Mrs. Haugen says we can come over next door. And she's like, sit down. We have work to do. And I'm like, but the space shuttle just blew up. And, so then I had to just kind of, and then she's like, she told me to sit down. I'm like, well, I never made it to the bathroom. Can I still go? And she's like, yeah. So then I went back and I told Mrs. Haugen, she doesn't believe me. Will you go tell her so we can come over? And that's like the only that one and punching you apparently are my only two vivid memories of grade
What a
school.
day! What a day! Here's just the thing about Ms. Haugen. And I'd say a funny thing there. Ms. Haugen, um, we remember getting to go to her house, and she had little parties at her house. We did the model rocket thing, which was
Hmm.
amazing. And
Yep.
she had a rocket with a camera in it, and go up and pop out, boom, take a camera. It's like like a drone shot, before the days of drones, right? And we just thought that was then we went back and actually we developed the film. We turned the whole place into a dark room, created a little dark room area, and developed the film. Or I think we did it down by the gym or something. But anyhow, I remember going to her house. She had an Apple IIe computer in her
Well, yeah,
house.
because of course Larry, Mr. Haugen, was the computer teacher. So yeah,
Yes,
that makes
and
sense.
she instilled in me like this sense of wonder at the whole computer thing. So I mean, I lived across the street from her, so I would go over to her house any chance I could and learn a little bit on her Apple IIe, which she also had. I think she pulled one into the somehow got budget for one in the classroom too, so we were able to mess around with it on there. But I remember her picking up a book and saying to me, someday, she goes, someday, and probably in your lifetime, someday computers will be this thin and you'll open them up like a book and the screen will be like this. And I'm like, whoa. I just thought that was the coolest thing. She was describing a laptop. I mean, like,
Yeah.
but when these things were
Or a tablet.
massive,
Yeah.
and she was saying, no, it's going to be like this. It's going to be just like, and it was actually because of her that I had this love for Apple computers, and I still own stock in Apple, which I'm super thankful for. But I wouldn't have had an interest like that if it wasn't for Ms. Haugen. She was just
Uh,
crazy cool that way.
she was, the animals in the classroom, the love of science, and in allowing us to work with each other, to collaborate with our classmates to try and accomplish a project. And you never got a chance to meet her, but we also had by the time I was a junior, we had a physics teacher, and her name was Diane Carstensen, and so Mrs. C. So we had, Mrs. H. Everybody had a letter. It was just
It was
Mrs.
an
H,
H.
Mr. B,
Yeah.
Mr. C, and uh, and so Diane was our physics instructor, and she was very, very, very much the same way in teaching the love of science and what you could do, and kind of. I mean, we were, you know. Do it like the egg test you talked about earlier, dropping the egg. I mean, we did all kinds. I remember we did the Rube Goldberg test, and
Yeah.
we went over to Brookings and competed at SDSU. They used to have that. I don't know if you remember that, when they would used to have the big
Science fair.
competition. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep. And Matt Peterson, I don't know if you remember Matt or not, but
Yeah.
Matt and I came up with we had our Rube Goldberg thing where it had to squeeze out 1 inch of toothpaste, and you had to start somehow, and at the end it had to be like timed at a minute,
Wow.
and you got penalized if it was less than a minute. You got penalized if you went over the minute, and we nailed it. I mean, 1.000 across the board, and exactly 1 inch. It was amazing. So Matt and I won that year. That was our
That's
senior
awesome.
year in high school that we won that. I remember that. But yeah,
They don't do school like that anymore.
no, they don't.
I'm super glad we grew up when we did, because I mean now, I mean, you find your iPhone, you're tracking your kids everywhere. If kid leaves the house without a phone, they don't know what to do with their life. Nobody memorizes phone number anymore. It's like I think about, I'd leave in the summertime, I'd leave in the morning, sometime not come home at night. Mom assumed that I was staying out somebody's backyard in a tent somewhere. Um, yeah, really, really interesting times. They just knew She knew I was either fishing or riding bikes or wandering through Hole in the Mountain Park. I'd come home for dinner, maybe or not. But it was just like there was no sense of danger. Or.
We used to play cat and mouse on our bikes in downtown. You remember? I don't know if you remember that, but I mean,
Yeah,
here's a 3 block by 2 block, 6 block square radius that we're driving, zipping past cars, in and out of traffic. And just and you mentioned Jay Furman. I remember John. We
yeah.
were playing one night and he wrecked, and he had a lot of road rash. He wrecked right by the bank. He had a little patch of loose gravel, and I thought we were all going to be in so much trouble. But
When they finally opened up they put an arcade with a foosball table in the corner store there.
yep.
Holmenberg's did, and I found a little side gig hustling truckers for money playing foosball, and yeah,
That I did not know. I had never
yeah.
heard that one before.
That was a fun. That was the first time I found the whole entrepreneurial concept. It was like, hey, this guy put $1 down. I put $1 down, and then I beat him, and then I get his dollar. I wonder if I can do something with this. And it was good. I actually ended up making enough money over the course of time to buy my first VCR. I just came home with wads of cash, and I remember Dad and Mom took us down to Sioux Falls, and I paid like $296 for this VCR. And it's like I wanted this VCR so badly. I didn't know why. It was just something I wanted.
Was
So
that even a time yet where VCR rentals were even out yet, or was that pre-rental?
Marty Hardware was renting movies, but they weren't renting them on VHS. They were
No,
renting
they had
laser
them on that.
discs.
Yes. And you know
Matter of
what?
fact,
I owned that until probably, what was it? Maybe Tanya probably knows. We probably threw it away about 10 or 15 years ago. I had
Wow.
it when Marty Hardware sold that out. We bought it. Why? I have no idea. We bought it, and when I say we, I don't know if my parents bought it or if I bought it, but it ended up in the Deutscher household along with all the movies that they had left.
I remember. I remember coming over to your house watching Clash of the Titans.
Yep.
Unbelievable. Wow.
And I know the last time that we had it out was, I think, when we lived down in Iowa. So that was probably, solid 15, 20 years ago. And we tried hooking it up and we couldn't get it to do anything. It just was, at that point it had been sitting for so long and nothing working. So we just, parted ways with it. But now in this day and time, you're kind of like, geez, would that have been worth any money if I would have held on to it and had somebody go through it or whatever. I see we got a question here. Tiny's got up, and Kerry Sorensen is from Ivanhoe. He's a good friend of mine and one of our sponsors of the show. And he asked, what are some of your favorite attributes of your parents that you find you and your wife also have when speaking?
Oh wow. Yeah, Tracy and I do actually do a lot of speaking together. We started actually doing marriage conferences just by request. And one of the things that we just get a couple of stools, put them up on stage, and we just kind of banter back and forth. We have some things that we want to get across to people, but it's amazing what comes out in those moments. And there's a lot of laughter in our house, a lot of spontaneity, and throughout the course of life, just doing life. I'd say this is where I got a lot of this from my parents. Just in doing life, we find lessons in just like, oh man, I'll say it's a phrase I use throughout the day where something happens and I'll say, oh man, that'll preach, as if to say, wow, there's a lesson. I'm going to take and just kind of tuck that away. And so those things become stories that end up showing up, in times when she and I are ministering, and she'll just tell some story or funny story or something happened to us or whatever, and it ends up teaching people something, and of course identifies with people in a lot of ways. So my parents used to do that quite a bit. My dad was an incredible storyteller. Yeah, it was just a super huge attribute, and so many of his stories had to do with lessons that he learned interacting with mom or them in some situation, and so I've kind of borrowed that and kept that, and even in this day of like high tech stuff, and attention spans, the size of a gnat, it seems like you can arrest people with just a simple once upon a time kind of a concept of, hey, here's a story and here's
Mm-hmm.
what it teaches. And I see actually I get where dad got it from because there was a verse in the scriptures out of the Gospel of Mark that says that Jesus taught in parables, and without a parable he did not teach. So when you see like Christ having a tremendous value for the art of story, then it's you realize, okay, there's something about this. I get up and give instructions all day long, but that's why Mrs. Haugen was such a great teacher, was because she taught in story. Everything was kind of a tale of something. She turned it into an adventure or a quest. And I see Christ doing the exact same thing. My dad borrowed that, and I've kind of kept that as sort of a tool in the arsenal. I worked some years ago. I worked with a dear friend of mine who's a New York Times bestselling author named Ted Decker. He's written like 45 novels and
Mm-hmm.
30 million books sold or whatever. Anyway, so Ted and I have been friends for many, many years. And he would say this phrase all the time. He would say, we live in story, and the future belongs to the storyteller. And the shortest distance between the head and the heart is a story. And I just never forgot that. So when Tracy and I teach, we have kind of kept that as sort of the forefront of how we teach what we teach.
And it's funny that you mentioned, not funny, but interesting that you mentioned his name, because prior to us getting on this afternoon, I was trying to remember the name of the person who spurred a conversation between me and you over a movie, and it was Ted, if I remember
Was it
correctly. Now,
really?
yeah, I'm trying to think of the name of the movie at the moment, but wasn't Ted? Wasn't he in the movie? Who? Maybe it
He
wasn't
did.
Ted.
Yeah.
Now,
They made a few movies out of some of his books, and he was always talking about how bad they were. He just didn't like any of them.
the one that and maybe it isn't Ted then. The movie that I remember it was a story. A young man, he ended up him and somebody else ended up in a Jeep, and the Jeep rolled over. And
the story of Rich Mullins,
there you go. That's what it is.
Ragamuffin. Yeah, the
Yep.
Ragamuffin movie.
Ragamuffin movie. Yep.
Yeah. Now Rich was a good friend, and he came down to Austin often, and I think about him all the time. Actually, still listen to his music today. But he passed away. I think it was 1997, and yeah, he was an incredible musician. And yeah, wear your seatbelt. That's a if you're driving in a Jeep without a top, wear your seatbelt.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah. Who?
yeah.
So let's stay on the topic of music just a little bit. What is your genre of music in these days? And do you have any favorite? I've just fallen in love. I'll tell you a little bit in a second. But favorite Christian rock or Christian bands?
Uh, I'm not really up on Christian music a whole lot. That may seem kind of strange, but when I go to like listen to music, it's going to sound weird, but I think everybody our age can identify with this. I kind of like revert back to the old '80s stuff. I'm sort of stuck in that era, that or like
Def
the
Leppard, Bon
oh
Jovi.
my goodness. I was just playing on my guitar. I was playing Wanted Dead or Alive just last night. Um, I mean, I don't know. It just kind of becomes sort of this sort of a comfortable nostalgia with it. And I don't find these days a lot of new music to be even remotely interesting to me. I've become my parents. It's bizarre. But, when I go and like, I mean, I just I love to rock things out to the point where as my kids were growing up, they'd be like, Dad, can you turn that down? What are you listening to? And my daughter's into, Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole. That's, along with some of the newer stuff. But singer-songwriter stuff. In terms of Christian bands, um, I've traveled with a lot of these I would say modern worship groups which I would have never guessed that would become even a big deal. Like that was church music, right, to me growing up. But now, Bethel and Hillsong and Elevation and those guys. I mean, these are all people that have become friends now over the years. And uh, but at the same time, when I'm just hanging out, I typically don't. It's not the kind of music that I listen to.
Interesting.
Terrible to say, but
No, I don't. I mean, I think that everybody has to have their own flavor in life, and I think that I'm not a huge Christian rock myself or Christian bands. I've kind of enjoyed. I've started to enjoy a couple different ones. For King and Country,
King and Country is awesome. Ren
they
Collective is amazing. Those guys are great. Yeah.
yeah the new song that. King and Country just put out the rendition of Little Drummer Boy
Yes.
has been I think I've probably listened to it like 50 times already. I very much have enjoyed that.
Just heard that
Um,
last week.
and then the other one, and I'm forgetting the name of it. Tanya and I just watched the movie not that long ago, but it was Imagine was the
I can only
movie.
imagine.
I
Yeah.
can only
Is
imagine.
that
Yeah,
is either Mercy Me or Casting
Mercy Me.
Crowns? I can't
No,
ever
Mercy Me.
remember.
Yep,
Okay.
Mercy Me. And I had not ever really heard of them. So watching that movie and then getting to learn and then, kind of doing. Thank God for the technology that we have today at our fingertips to do.
Isn't that
I don't.
amazing?
Here's one. Do you and Tracy? Do you watch much TV? Are you
Oh
guys?
yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah.
So when you're watching TV, can you actually get through the whole TV show, or do you stop and pause it like 50 times looking up character? What other movie were they in, or what other TV show?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly the way Tanya and I are too. There's not a thing that we can get through from start to finish without pausing it multiple times
Yeah.
to try and figure out. And it's usually a race. We both recognize the person, and then it's who can type in quick enough to get to like
Pull up their
IBDM or something.
IMDb page or
Yeah, exactly.
Wikipedia or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, totally. Yeah,
Uh,
I was just doing that last night with The Mandalorian. I was trying to figure out who some of these characters were, and I realized one of the bad guys in The Mandalorian's like, oh wait, that's Gus from Breaking Bad. Okay, wait, what else was he in? Anyway.
The Mandalorian is something I have not got into yet. I have not watched that yet.
You know,
So
I'm a Star Wars fan from back in, back as a kid,
mhm,
and
mhm.
uh, people have been. I've got a kind of close group of friends we all hang out with, and they've been raving on this thing, and I've been like, yeah, whatever, you know. I started it. I thought, yeah, okay, it might be kind of whimsical and fun, and I started it. That thing is amazing. That is better than the movies, man.
Now
I kid you not.
let's see if I can get your memory here on something. Do you remember? I'm gonna say that he had the best Star Wars. Uh, uh, what do you want to say? Star Wars collection of toys. Do you remember who that was? In Lake
In Lake
Benton?
Benton?
Yeah,
Oh man.
we already talked about
Wow.
him today. We mentioned his name earlier.
Did we really?
Hmm.
What do we okay, wait, who do we mention? I don't nobody in my class was
No,
down with that.
this would have been 1 year older than you, I believe.
Okay. No, I don't know.
Chad Newberger.
Did he really?
Yeah, Chad had the Millennium Falcon. I mean, he had the whole 9 yards. It was awesome.
Wow.
It was always fun to go play Star Wars stuff at Chad's house because he had all of them. Yeah,
I
I can
that's
remember that
crazy.
because I remember his when we used to play it was his second level and there was a kind of a steep set of stairs and
Yeah.
yeah, that was their house was a little different, but yeah, that was. I can remember he had quite the collection of Star Wars stuff at the time.
When
One person in town, I don't know if you ever knew this, and he was your neighbor, was Mr. Downs, Milo
yeah,
Downs.
no, I remember
He was
Milo
a
was
he had a
he and I
huge
ran into each
comic
other
book.
a few years ago.
He was a huge comic book guy. I don't know if you ever knew that or not.
I did not know that.
Yeah, yeah, he was. I think kind of in our years, and maybe until Jeff and Marcy graduated, he was kind of into
Wow.
comics and had a lot of comics. I don't think he's. Last I remember saying something to him about him, he doesn't have him anymore. But yeah, he had him for a long time. Jeff's son, who would have been what 2, 3 years older than you, I think maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Jeff lives over by Owatonna, Minnesota and used to be for a good 10 years, I think at least, traveled and played with the Johnny Home Band.
Wow.
If you remember the Johnny Home Band ever come into,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, he was the keyboardist and backup vocal guy for Johnny Home and and Jeff, I don't ever remember Jeff being in band. So that was kind
Yeah,
of the
I
weird
don't. I
thing.
was about to say I don't remember him being in band at all.
And I was trying to think the other day, did you play trombone?
Trumpet,
Oh, trumpet. Okay. I couldn't
trumpet.
remember if it
Yeah,
was trumpet or trombone. So,
me,
yeah.
me and Christy Stelter were the only ones in our class playing. Oh, Todd Berger. Todd Berger played trumpet too. There was three of us, and we lived to go to Valley Fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
We lived to go to Valley Fair and play Eye of the Tiger, walking around High
Yep.
Chaparral and Eye of the Tiger all day long, baby. You play drums, right?
Yep. Yep. I haven't been to Valley Fair in so many years. I don't even know. That was probably the first year that Tanya and I were together. Maybe was when her and I went to Valley Fair once. But yeah, it's been a
Yeah.
long, long time.
I see
Carrie
Carrie says she
Carrie
and Teresa married at
married at
19.
19.
Did they really?
Well, Teresa might have been 19. I don't know. I mean, there's a couple of
Yeah.
years age difference there. So,
Yeah, Chad was a
um,
couple of years older than us.
yep. So,
Um,
Teresa might have been 19. That's definitely possible.
yeah, I remember going over to Chad's house. I still keep in touch with the Newbergers on Facebook, but I remember going over to Chad's house watching David Letterman at night. Yeah,
That must have been that was like back when David was on at 11:30 instead of
that was the
10:30.
super late show.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's see here. A couple other things, and I've kind of skipped past our normal when I would do some commercials or some sponsor shout outs because I'm enjoying this, and not that I don't enjoy the other ones, but this is so much fun with you. I know you had mentioned in the pre-interview questions one of your proudest moments, and I was pretty. I got to admit that when I saw it and you posted it on Facebook, I thought, wow, that is so cool. I never knew anybody. I'll never know anybody else in life that got to do something like that. And that was you getting to speak before Congress.
That was fun.
And tell us a little bit about that. How did that all unfold?
Yeah, well, she was a House of Representatives member back then, but Kristi Noem, who's governor of South Dakota now.
Sure.
So her dad used to listen to my dad on the radio quite a bit, and she and I connected on a plane coming out of Sioux Falls one day. I was up there. I was in Sioux Falls doing a conference, and she was going back to Washington. And this has been many, many years ago. And everybody on the plane knew who she was except for me. And so I just remember everybody stopping and going, can I get a picture? Can I, say hello to you or whatever? And she's just super gracious to everybody. And I'm thinking, this woman's a celebrity, and I don't know who she is. And I'm pretty up on pop culture. So finally, I lean over to her and I said, I'm sorry, everybody in this plane knows who you are. We're sitting across the aisle from each other, so it's kind of awkward. I said, everybody on this plane knows who you are except for me. And she goes, oh, my name's Kristi. I'm U.S. House of Representatives member representing South Dakota. I said, oh, that's great. And she goes, what's your name? I said, Bill Vanderbush. And she goes, are you related to Henry Vanderbush? And I said, yeah, it was my dad. And she has a moment. And her dad had been killed in a farming accident, and when they cleaned his truck out, they found stacks of my dad's tapes. And she remembered listening to my dad on the radio, especially when they were snowed in the wintertime on Sunday mornings, couldn't get to church. They'd listen to my dad on the radio. So we just connected that day. And she goes, if you're ever in Washington, we're there at the same time, please let me know. I'd love to give you and your family a tour or whatever. And I said, how ironic. I'm actually going to be in D.C. next week. I was speaking out there, and she goes, okay, well, let's get together. So Tracy and I met with Kristi, and she took us on a Sunday afternoon, took us on a tour of the Capitol. I'll never forget. And Capitol's closed on Sunday. So getting a chance to just kind of walk through every part of the Capitol you can imagine, including underneath of it. There's like tunnels and all this
Mm-hmm.
crazy stuff. You remember like in Austin Powers, the old James Bond movies, those little like train cars, that go underground,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they have all of that stuff underneath the Capitol and these little roads you could drive on. I mean, it's really quite elaborate and a neat place. So we get done with the day of the tour, and she goes, would you be interested in opening Congress for prayer in the fall? And I go, yeah, sure, let me know. So we scheduled it and made a date on the calendar, and I flew to Washington D.C. and walked into Speaker of the House's office with Kristi and some of her staff, and John Boehner was Speaker of the House at the time. Super, super nice guy, and he came in, and we had some time to kick around, and so sat down and had a really, really cool conversation. Pope Francis had been in that the week before, and John
Oh,
sat
Pope
down.
Francis opened for you. That's nice.
Yeah, wasn't that cool, huh? Yeah, yeah. It was actually exactly a week before, and he was speaking before Congress, and John said, of course, John grew up Catholic, so this was like a dream for him. And so he says the Pope comes into his office, and they sit down in these two chairs, and they have this beautiful conversation. At one point, the Pope reaches over his hands and he blesses him, which for a Catholic kid who grew up in the tradition, that's just a huge deal. But then he said a most unusual thing happened. He goes, and then Pope Francis says, "Now would you pray for me?" And he said, I suddenly had this realization that we were just two guys, like two human beings
Mm-hmm.
praying for one another. And it was like the most profoundly moving moment of his life. So I'll never forget that conversation because John was incredibly moved by just recounting the experience. And so then all of a sudden he goes, okay, session's starting. We got to go. So next thing I know, we're funneled out there um, to pray before Congress is a kind of a song and dance because you've got to write the prayer out, you've got to submit it for approval, and then they copy it out and put it up there, and you're just going to read it. I mean, that's the way it works, and I think they want to make sure that they're approving of what you're about to say before you get in front of a microphone, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So it's not a whole lot of
you don't want to slip something in that's going to somehow start a conflict either between the United States and another country, or even within the own United States government.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
they're afraid somebody from Wisconsin is going to yell "Go Pack" or something. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, and maybe they should, whoever was being that closely monitoring at that time, maybe they should hire them again. Was seen as we seem to have a lot of loose lips in the political realm nowadays. But
Well, this was before everybody was putting everything on Twitter. You know,
oh, sure,
we
yeah.
so
Because
so
what
we
was this during Bush too or
this
Clinton?
was was it Obama?
Obama.
Obama in the
Okay.
White House at the time? Yeah, it was
Wow.
Obama's first 4 years. So yeah, it was. That would be a bummer to go back to the clandestine presidencies of the past. Where nobody knows anything about anything that's going on. But uh, I don't know. It's almost like every now and then I'm thinking that's a little too much information.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Another moment that I know that you're pretty proud of, and I know that you share this with Tracy, is that you're a published author. You've put out is it 2 books now, or just the one?
Yeah, I've written actually quite a few, but the latest one was picked up by Broad Street Publishing, and they published a book that I did called Reckless Grace, which is just theology book on the goodness of God, with the idea that God is better than you think and you can't imagine him better than he is, and then just kind of letting that just sort of sit with people, and that's essentially what the book's about. Um, I wrote a book with Ted Decker called The Forgotten Way, which was kind of a meditative devotional journey, 21-day meditation into identity and the truth of who we really are, trying to answer the question, why are we here? What are we doing here? What's the purpose of all this? So that was just kind of a personal journey that Ted and I were on at the time, and then our families convinced us to publish it, put it out there, and so we did. Ted and I self-published that. We didn't do that with his publisher at all, though, and it was actually the best thing we ever could have done because
Oh
we
wow.
had complete creative freedom to do it, and sold a lot of books. It's still, you can't. Maybe you can find it on Amazon now, but we tried to avoid selling it on Amazon to make it as like the sort of this underground thing where you got to like search for it, you got to find it. When you get to the right website, you got to give them like weird information in order to like get a copy of it and whatnot. But it worked. It was marketing genius, and it worked really really well. So
Is this
uh,
something that at some point you'll convert it to like an audio? I mean, in today's world of audiobooks and all that stuff, is that something that you guys may do at some point, or?
yeah, I think there might be a time where we end up doing that down the road. It's an ebook. There's an e-version, and yeah, I could see an audio book happening with The Forgotten Way. That was a fun project though. Um, Most everything we're doing has been or being converted somehow to an audio book. Tracy's written actually a lot of books. She's a novelist for the most part, and so she wrote a couple of books that are novels called The Porches of Holly and The Windows of Holly, and it's the scandals in a small town kind of a concept, but it's really really well done. As a matter of fact, she's uh, got a producer from Disney that's working on converting it to film. The screenplay's been written for it, and she was just actually a couple of nights ago on with some folks from Hallmark who may be interested in converting it to a Hallmark or a Lifetime kind of a film. So
Then we
yeah, I don't
get an
know.
Oscar or an Emmy nomination, Golden Globe, something like that. That would be pretty.
I That'd be great. I just want. I don't.
There's space on the shelf behind you there. I can see it. There's room for it.
I'm just super proud of her. She's just done such a great job. As writing goes in the family, she's the writer of the family, and
Is
she's
she the
just
one? Is this something that she's always pursued? I mean, since at beginning was like in the beginning you were thinking film, and then you found your path into being a pastor. What was her path originally?
I think she just wanted to be a mom, wife and mom, and then she found writing to be kind of a hobby, and she's always been really really good at it. Just incredibly well just her books are fantastic. They're always incredibly well reviewed, and they're page turners. They're just I don't read fiction for the most part, which was weird when Ted Decker first asked me, "Hey, what's one of my books that you really enjoyed?" I was like, I couldn't tell you. I just don't. I'm not a fiction reader. And I wade through it. You know, if somebody gives me a fiction book, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to wade through this thing. But when Tracy wrote her first book, The Porches of Holly, you know, she said, "Would you just kind of, you know, you don't read fiction, but can you kind of look over it and take a look at it?" And I said, "Sure." So I grabbed it. She had a proof copy of it. So I saw the proof. I'm like, "Okay, great." And I start reading it, and next thing I know, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I wasn't into it because it was hers. I was into it because from the first page, the story grabbed me, and I was like, "Wow." So I think anybody who's ever gone through difficulties in a marriage, or where things have fallen apart and don't think they can ever get back together again, you're not sure if they ever will or not. In the book, I mean, even all the way up to the end, you're just like, oh my gosh, is there any hope for this thing? But she doesn't write in a way that it's predictable. I did not see coming what she wrote, and so yeah, and the sequel is just as good, if not better.
Well,
So
and you
I mean,
said
it
you
was.
said some of it was stories of small towns and stuff like that. Do we got? Is there any parts of it? Did she use you for any sort of background on something
Inspiration.
silly? Yeah, something silly from Lake Benton that ended up in the book.
There are a few things that I think people who grew up in Benton and other small towns will be able to identify with that only a small town people who know small town life could really appreciate. So yeah, spending a considerable amount of time up in Ruth and Lake Benton and that part of the country, especially my dad's later years, really rubbed off on her because she was a city girl at heart, from downtown Austin,
Hmm.
and so she found kind of the romantic side, the idealistic side of living in Lake Benton or living in Ruthven, where you just get out and bike around the town, and you might see like two cars moving. She just grabbed a hold of that and loved it. Where when I saw it through her eyes, then I appreciated it from a completely different vantage point. And so I think it informed some of the elements of the story. I don't know if any of it is stuff that came directly from those locations. I do know that there, in 25 years of pastoring, we've seen just about every scenario imaginable, without exaggeration, in terms of people and life and families and whatnot. And some of those scenarios that we've seen, although the names have been changed to protect the guilty, um, some of those scenarios are in the book, and so when I read the book, I was like, "Oh, I remember dealing with
I
that one.
remember who
Oh,
that
yeah, I
was.
remember that
Yeah,
one."
yeah, yeah.
So it's interesting. Some of so it feels very raw and revelatory, and it doesn't feel imagined or made up, and that's because it's not. Everything that's in there is stuff that we've seen on some level. So I think people can identify with it because it is real. And yet she writes from a very redemptive place. But well, I put it this way: the lady who's in charge of stuff at Hallmark, where she was, the executive or CEO or whatever of Hallmark, told her the other night that it was too edgy for Hallmark. So so I'm like, oh, you're not like a church lady writer. You're not writing this for a technically like a Christian audience. She's writing it for people who are just, I would say, maybe broken on the wheels of living, and wondering if there's hope. But at the same time, it's not necessarily like a book that you would find in a Christian bookstore. So it's
Sure.
very different. It's a very different kind of a novel, and but I'm proud of her. She's a super good writer.
Awesome. It's always encouraging to have that partner in life that has the extra skill set maybe or different skill set that you don't have. I mean that people ask Tanya and I all the time, how can you stand working together? And it's like we love working together. I mean
Yeah,
she's good at one thing, I'm good at another. We kind of we kind of swap off as far as the duties and things like that, and we run our business,
and it
and
was
it works
so
for
good.
us.
So good to meet Tanya today for the first time. Actually, I've seen pictures, but I've never actually a chance to say hi until today. So
Yeah.
that was great just to connect. And I hope we get a chance to do. I'll be actually up in your neck of the woods in the end of January. So
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Where
I'll
are you going to be at?
be speaking over in Rochester at a place called Destiny Church,
Okay.
and they do a pastors conference where people come from all over the place every year. And it was kind of up in the air as to whether or not it was going to happen this year. I travel almost every week, but this year everything is just kind of like, you know, been in flux, and so
Right.
everything's just, you never know where it's going to be. So I'm hoping every so far, they haven't canceled the end of January thing. But every time I get up in that area, I'm thinking I'm gonna jump over to Mankato, right? You're
Fairmont. So
Fairmont,
just,
which is
yep, Fairmont. About an hour and 45 from Rochester. So,
okay.
yep.
Okay, yeah,
Yep. Fairmont's right on I-90. So as you would go across, it'd be, Rochester, Albert Lee, Fairmont, Worthington,
yes,
and then Laverne and Sioux Falls would be kind
okay,
of the path
yeah.
there that would go. Yeah, no, yeah, that'd be awesome. Well, I've said before that I'll treat you to a cup of coffee if you're ever in the neighborhood.
I'd love
But if you
that.
end in Mankato, that's fine too. I can drive up to Mankato, not a problem. So, but Bill, I appreciate your time today with me and with our show. I do consider you a friend, and I
As
have
well.
enjoyed being able to reconnect with you. And whenever I watch a Christian movie or some weird thing, I'm always throwing you oddball questions, and so I appreciate the fact that you take the time to answer my silly questions about things, and it's nice. I enjoy it. So, any parting words that you'd have for our viewers here today
Man,
for Christmas?
man, I'm just glad to reconnect with you. And after all of the health challenges you have faced, I'm just glad to see that you're still on this side of the topsoil. Man, we got too much life left to live, and too many days left to go through for any more of us from Lake Benton to check out.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I agree with you there. I agree with you there.
So
So,
I'm just
um,
saying just super thankful for our friendship and reconnecting after all these years. But at the same time, man, I'm just, you during every challenge you faced, you've been prayed for from this household, and we just continue to stand with you that everything regarding your health and everything would just continue to improve.
thank you, thank you. Are Britton and Sarah going to make it home for Christmas, or are they
Sarah
staying tight?
is, Sarah is, but Britton is not. Britton is, Sarah's actually here. She lives with us, but she's about to move back to Austin,
Okay.
and she's gonna do what I was gonna do, work in the film industry. So
Oh, all
that's
right.
kind of her passion and what she's gone to school for. My son ended up going to school for animation, so he followed the artistic side on that side of things, and he ended up going to work for. He did some animation for Disney, and then he went to work for Sony PlayStation, where he worked on a couple of video games that were huge. The last Star Wars game, the Jedi one, he was an animator on that, and then The Last of Us 2, which is like Game of the Year, I guess. He was an animator on that. Then he just started a new job at High Moon Studios, where he's working on the next Call of Duty. So
Oh, okay.
I've got the dad's insider information on.
You'll have all the cheat codes and everything. You'll know exactly how to get all the weapons and
And
get
the
through the
reality is, I
walls.
get nothing, nothing. He is a rock. He will not reveal anything. So
Sure. Oh,
yeah,
I
no,
would imagine he's probably sworn to. He's probably has to sign a few documents that says he's not allowed to talk about that stuff, right?
yeah, he married a great girl who we love dearly, and they live out in La Jolla, California. So we went out to visit them around Thanksgiving, and back in November we were out there. But he is not going to make it home for Christmas this year. Just travel right now is just a pain. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And is Sarah hoping to get in on the film side of it? Is she hoping to do kind of what you did or the acting side of it or what?
She loves production and directing and the technical aspects of things, and she's written a couple of screenplays, and that's just a passion for her. So I think we're going to see more of her behind the scenes, but she wants to be the one to create the story, tell it, direct it, that kind of thing. So
Well, you
She's
got to
got
find a
it.
way to self-fund one of Tracy's books in that screenplay. Have Sarah produce it. Burton can do
Yes.
some animation parts to it. You can do some voiceover work or something. Get the whole family involved in it and self-publish it like you and Ted did, and get it out there on the. Maybe it could be the first movie back in the theaters or something like that.
Everybody in the family is working on projects, and I'm usually the last one to be asked. So
Well, that's because you're usually the busiest, right?
yeah,
You're gone. You're probably gone the most, aren't you? Traveling so much.
yeah. Tracy goes with me most of the time, but yeah, I am out a lot. So I live on airplanes. It feels like, at least before this year, it was.
Right. Well, stay safe and stay away from the COVID and continue to do amazing things not only in your life but through your life through others. So again, thanks for joining us today. Say hi to Tracy and Merry Christmas and best wishes to you and the whole family.
Merry Christmas, Jay. Merry Christmas to you and Tanya, and blessings on your business and everything you set your hand to. Take care.
Sounds good. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks.
All right. So that brings our episode today. We ran a little long, but that's okay because it was worth it. Want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, the Visual Identity Vault in Fairmont, Gemini Studios in downtown Fairmont, Mankato Movers, the Wow Zone Family Entertainment Center in Mankato, Gracie B. Doodle in Fairmont, and River Valley Dental and Travelusa, also located in Mankato. So thanks to all of our sponsors, and we will have a new guest next week. We look forward to seeing you next Thursday, the 31st, New Year's Eve. We will have a special guest on New Year's Eve. Thanks a lot, folks. Have a great day.